ways. So there has never been, in my mind, a more important time for us to figure out how to structure classrooms that are safe, welcoming, honoring of students, and that give students some place to go and vent about the reality that we're all living in. So the time couldn't be more important for figuring out how to do this education thing better. So we're going to start with Curtis today. And Curtis and I talked about his introduction. My favorite thing to say during an introduction for someone as famous as Dr. Curtis Acosta is to just say, Google him. But I will say that he was a teacher in Tucson for 20 years. He was featured in the film Precious Knowledge. He's been featured on Huffington Post, the Daily Show, CNN. And he's an extraordinary teacher. So I'm going to just give this over to you, Curtis. Thank you for being here. I am deeply sorry that we have so few people here to participate today, because I know how important your time is, and I know how busy you are spreading messages around the country. So you have my sincere apology that people who are required to attend this training are not here.
I'm just happy to see all the Ph.D. scholars, because that makes it feel like a big family. You know, my over/under was 6, so I'm pleasantly surprised with how many folks are here. So anyway, thank you, Etta. Just to hi everybody, I'm Curtis. Also Dr. Acosta, which I'm still getting used to. Originally I was going to do, if you can see my PowerPoint, just nod if you can see my PowerPoint, like slide there. Yeah, we're good? All right, good. So originally I was going to do this one here. It says Authentic Caring and Indigenous Epistemologies, a vehicle to youth, agency, liberation, power. And that's based upon the work I was doing with my colleagues in Mexican American Studies. And I just want to say, you know, as a survivor of trauma imposed by the state, by the government, I can tell you that it doesn't matter if you're a teacher or not. So what our students are going through can definitely happen to you. So yeah, I am aware of my privilege in a lot of ways, but I also like to bring enlightenment to audiences that don't think it'll happen to them. That, oh, many things can happen to you when it comes to power and power unchecked. So happily, we did check the power, and recently we were awarded a major victory for justice in our country and in our state by Judge A. Wallace Tashima, and I'm no longer an illegal teacher, which is the first time I've not been an illegal teacher in this state since 2011, which is what one of my former students said to me the Sunday after the decision was rendered. He goes, "How does it feel not to be illegal?" And I was like, whoa. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about my identity is pretty wrapped up into all that trauma and those experiences. So I'm still learning a lot of, still early days in that development. But I think what's happening to our students through, and so many other folks in our communities right now is it's really important why I'm not doing this talk today. And if we want to do this one, especially Ph.D. scholars, before you go home, if you want this talk, for sure, let's do it. We'll figure out a time. But really, I was hoping this was at least an hour and a half. It's an hour. It's probably 50 minutes now. Yes, it is. I'm good at time now when I'm presenting. And this is what we're going to do instead is to get to this piece, I would need this first piece to do that with you. And so that's what I'm saying. So if we want to do a part 2, let me know. I can definitely come back and show you, because this was a real critical into getting the transformative effects and transformative positive academic outcomes that our Mexican American Studies program in Tucson had. That's quite honestly, it's hard saying this because you try to be humble. At least that's how we're raised, but we've not seen the longitudinal effects of a program like ours for Mexican-American students and Latino students in the history of this state and possibly the country. So that's a sales pitch for me to come back and do this with y'all at another time, but I thought it would be more important, especially in light of the week's events, to do this instead. This is usually a 2-hour workshop I do with teachers, my colleagues and I, when we go on the road in California and Washington, around the country. Those are the school districts we're working with right now are in Washington, California, Washington State. But we've done this, and I've done this in other spots all over the United States. This is a workshop we do. We usually sandwich it in between two really active kind of modeling type of workshops. So this is a more talky one, but it still has interactive elements. Again, it's a 2-hour block in itself, so I'm trying to cut this one down to size. So we'll see how it goes, rushed as it is, but the title of it is pretty much important for not only the purposes of the events from this week and how folks are feeling in our schools and our communities right now, and the fear that is definitely palpable and that we've felt in Arizona for a long, long time, to be honest. But it's also very important to what Francesca, Dr. Lopez is going to do next, and Dr. Orozco, what Rick's going to do next as well. So I thought I would, abandon what I was going to do originally because it makes more sense to give them like this foundation. And then if I come back at a later time, it'll also make more sense too. So we're going to literally dive into like the history of education a little bit in this country, where it came from, the purposes of it, and the philosophy and ideologies that gave birth to it. So the idea of rehumanizing education, well, you got to know how it's not been humanizing in the past for us to do that. So here's an anticipatory set question that we like to model our practice. I want you to think about this for not only this talk, but the other two that Dr. Lopez and Orozco are going to be doing in the next couple months. So how can humanizing practices transform our relationships, classrooms, and community? So I just want you to think about that. Think about how can our classrooms what kind of practices, humanizing practices, how can they transform spaces that we ordinarily walk through and navigate every day, right? And maybe right now you can interrogate whether or not we think we need more humanizing practices or not. I mean, it's pretty obvious with some of the reactions to yesterday's announcement by the administration. There's a whole lot of people taking the streets asking and demanding more humanizing relationships, more humanizing practices. But we're going to also look at the classroom in the next couple months with my colleagues as well. So just something to think about as an overall thread for all three of us, if I may be so bold for my colleagues. How many of y'all have done yoga? Raise your hand. All right. Yoga? No yoga down there? There's no yoga in Mexico? Hi. All right, we're going to make that. Amaru, good job. She does yoga. So yoga, I've done yoga, which is not the most macho thing to do, but it's a whole new 21st century. I'm a 21st century Chicano, Mexicano. So yeah, we're all about the yoga. I got to get Rick into the yoga, ¿Quién es más macho, Rick? Huh? All the yogurt. Yogurt, he said. All right, but anyways. So yoga is amazing. When I first started doing yoga, it really helped me psychologically get through the trauma that when I was at Tucson High, what was happening to our program. And I was blessed that we had a yoga program at Tucson High, and she kept yelling at me. She's Chicana too. She'd be, pues, you look ugly. She'd just do this across like the quad. And I'm like, what do you mean I look ugly? She's like, your pain body. Right? You look like, so in other words, I had this aura of negativity and nastiness that she was calling out. And I go, I'm going through a lot right now. Okay? Can't you understand? And she goes, I can. I go, well, what should I do? And we're yelling across the whole school, mall quad area at each other, right? Because she's a comadre, so it was all good. But she would just point to her room. She'd just do this, right? And she'd we're in here. And so eventually I did. I got called out, or what I like to say called in by a couple students, and they said, yo, Two wonderful Mexicana students came to me and they're like, we're worried about you. You're losing your joy in front of the classroom. You need to think about this. And I went, all right. So I went into the yoga. So yoga was really humbling because I thought it was going to be just meditation, which is cool and everything. I'm down for that. But it was really about, being in so much pain that you have clarity. And it's all through stretching, which is really healthy for your body, right? Right? And so I loved it. And it became a way I navigated through a lot of the mental anguish and stress that I was internalizing every day. So we like to think about the productive discomfort, like yoga, right? So productive discomfort, as you can see there, signals we're in the midst of something new, in the midst to be stretched and learning something, all right? It's really important. And so we ask you to find yourself in this work, right? Not only mine, but the ones to follow. So as a student growing up, this may trigger or inspire some connection, all right? Or maybe you as a teacher right now. All right, maybe you'll seek some connection to that. Your family history, the curriculum you use, relationships with students, relationships with colleagues, which is something I didn't make this slide. My colleague Orlando Carrion did, and it's really important we have healthy relationships with our colleagues because that's something that I can tell you. And over at the Thirsty Scholar later. Not today, but one of these days, we can talk about what we went through from our own colleagues that was really dehumanizing and really hostile during the struggle to save our classes. This is great that you're all here because for me, it breathes a life into having real collegial relationships and real loving relationships with one another. So thank you for coming. So we're going to start with this idea called essentialism. Does anybody know what essentialism is in any of our three venues right now? By the way, I keep looking at the TV. I got to make sure I look at my own little class here. Right? Anybody want to give it? Raise your hand or do one of these. Oh, I think Etta. Yeah, go ahead, Etta.
What, you want me to give a definition of it?
I thought I saw your hand go up.
I did. You did. I see my hand go up.
Okay.
So I would say that essentialism is a way of defining, we'll talk about people using a particular set of concepts that sort of limits the definition of that identity. And so essentialism is what Donald Trump does to women. Did you hear my example?
Yeah, I did. I said excellent before your example, and then I said, oh my gosh, she's still going.
I just wanted to give an example. I'm a teacher.
So here's the definition. It's very, very, very. I mean, Dr. Carla got really awesomely close to this off the top of her head. También, awesome job with the definition we provide for you. So as you read this. And you go ahead and read it. It's a fancy word for what? When we do what to people?
Stereotype.
What's that?
Stereotype.
Prejudged stereotype. Yeah, we used to say that. So in the classroom, I used to teach essentialism, this term, both my partners in the social studies and myself in the literature classes. This was a concept that we wanted our students to know. And so, we, amongst ourselves, we knew that there's a formal definition, but we also it's a fancy word for stereotyping. So that way it was more accessible to us, and that's why Eda's example is really good too. So just think about your own identity right now. Your own identity is probably pretty complex. And think about people that reduce it down to one thing, right? The essential things that they probably see on the outside, right? And maybe not the complexity and the nuanced identity that you really have. So part of those identities you see on the next bullet, right? Race, ethnicity, gender, sexuality are figured as rational, objective, apolitical, fixed, and universal. So this is where these two concepts kind of get lumped together or bond together, right? We for some reason, humans, and right, we're academics, a lot of us, and all of us, right? Yeah. So we like to categorize things. That's the history of, part of our history as academics. We're going to talk about the history of academia today a lot. But we like to categorize. We have to put things in little tables and boxes and, graphic organizers so we can name it something, right? But that's a counter narrative to us as human beings. And so it can be good to categorize things, but then not to stay fixed in that. Then understand that culture, human beings, we are always evolving, and we're not static, we're not fixed, all right? Some of the issues we're having in our country that Etta talked about and I mentioned come from more of this fixed kind of ideology towards who we are. All right? Essentialism does not consider social constructs or intersectionalities when understanding identity. Okay? So it's important as you find yourself in this work to stretch out of those fixed and apolitical and objective kind of things that we've been trained to see the world. All right, so we're going to watch an essentialized moment right here. And I want you then to have a quick discussion in Sierra Vista and Douglas and here in Tech Park about what you see, what moments of essentialism are you see. Okay, y'all ready? Hopefully you can all hear it.
Hi there.
Hi.
Nice day, huh?
Yeah, finally, right?
Where are you from? Your English is perfect.
San Diego. We speak English there.
Oh, no. Where are you from?
Well, I was born in Orange County, but I never actually lived there.
I mean before that.
Before I was born.
Yeah, where are your people from?
Well, my great-grandma was from Seoul.
Korean. I knew it. I was like, she's either Japanese or Korean. But I was leaning more towards Korean.
Amazing.
Yes. Hamshasina. There's a really good teriyaki barbecue place near my apartment. So I actually really like kimchi.
Cool. What about you? Where are you from?
San Francisco.
But where are you from?
Oh, I'm just American.
Really? You're Native American?
No, just regular American. Oh, well, I guess my grandparents are from England.
Oh, well. Hello, Governor! What's all this then? Drop them over to you. Let's get a small tea. Double, toil and trouble. Mind the gap, beware Jack the Ripper. Bloody hell! Pip, pip, stereo! I think your people's fish and chips are amazing.
Fish and chips.
Really? Must be a Korean thing.
All right, so go ahead in your groups and just talk a little bit, just for like about 1 minute, just have everybody throw out their ideas and talk about what essentialized moments were happening.
What's a cream?
You don't get to see the outtakes. All right, we'll talk. Go ahead, talk amongst yourselves.
Where are you from? So, I think a lot of our students get that here.
Yeah.
From did
Who does that? Most places. Each other, maybe between them?
maybe teachers,
The teachers, okay.
So the assumption of
even
diet.
each other.
I get that when I cross the border all the time. They're like, where did you learn English? Where are you from?
Assumption
Like,
of identity.
we have great schools here too.
Like,
so.
I'm
But I think
American.
it's
You must
think it's-
identify with
mostly here because there's a lot of
where your
different
parents
colors, different
or grandparents or
your
whatever.
expressions and everything.
Right, 2 generations ago.
That's
We are
right.
very used to stereotype people.
That's supposed to
If
be
you're
American.
not like white, you are different and you're not from here.
And you're
So
not
They're labeled already.
Why is it that he didn't see that? Why is it that what's at the root of that? What's at the root of his assumption about her un-Americanness and the perceived obviousness of his?
The perceived whiteness, privileged. I mean, is it ignorance? Is it? I mean, does it fall under ignorance? And we know it's not.
It's very common in
Doesn't have the perceptions to see that.
If we see
Is that
somebody
something that can be taught to him?
we say, oh,
If we
it's
spend some time developing curriculums, could he learn that he's being
we can listen them to speak.
They're taught. Our founding fathers, there were these English colonial guys. But that's not
we see
that's
somebody
not the whole story.
skin,
America.
not you.
So the lack of
They say, oh, you're
knowing
Mexican.
the story of
You're not, you are not you are supposed to be Mexican.
And you're choosing to not acknowledge.
You must be American.
So which one? I mean, so if we're all part of
I
this
must be American
society
because
that
she's
teaches us
very white.
the normalization,
She's not blonde, but
see
she's
that
very white.
if you're not
you cannot be
Euro-American
Mexican.
descendant,
That's
then
true
you are
because when
the
they
other
talk about
and
Mexican,
somewhere else,
a lot of
and it's obvious that you have to.
they
Then
think
what
of
does it say about
chato,
the ignorance of this person? Maybe we've been all taught. We've all been taught this lesson.
or something. That's what
All of us have been taught.
Okay, so but what if I come from it's just like him? And how did I not? I mean, there are still elements of me that will act like I'm ignorant, but I will learn and I will change. But I know that. But I know people don't.
That's a great question. So let's bring it back together because I think that fits right into where we're going next. All right, let's bring it back, everybody.
We're back.
All right, cool. My Tucson folks got hella engaged. I'm sorry, I'm from the Bay Area, so every once in a while, like originally, so like every once in a while you'll hear the word hella come out, which is what our way of saying very or much. So hella engaged means like really engaged or very engaged. All right. So we're going to dive deep into why how that happens, that transaction between those two folks, and because it happens daily in this country, to especially to folks of color, but that's not the only group. But in order to do so, we're going to dive into a little bit of theory to help us out. So that we use an ethnic studies paradigm, and I'll also at the end return back to this paradigm through a different scholar. But this quote really will help us as we engage into the rest of our time together today. So ethnic studies paradigm offer important historical insight into the ways that colonizing and imperialist governments have engaged indigenous and non-white populations over the past 500 years. Even more, these fields offer important insight into the histories, legacies, cultures of communities that are often lost in U.S. educational narratives of Western progress and Western values. So obviously that the gentleman, he needs this ethnic studies paradigm, this framework, to help him understand what the gaps of what is missing in his own lens towards what the woman says. Because she's like, that one awesome exchange where she goes, where did I come from before I was born? Like where are you from? You mean before I was born? Yeah. I mean that's where folks in this fixed mentality towards her, she's forever foreign to him. And where does this come from? Well, it comes from the idea of colonizing, colonialism and imperialism. And so we're going to look at that today. All right? So I love that picture, right? So this is imperialism, right? You see the gentleman with the top hat, right? So, that's England, and it might remind. And what is it? What are those things coming out of the water? Yeah, tentacles, right? So he's like the tentacles of imperialism are touching all these different lands, and you can see Malta. You can see, I can't really see very well, but all these different parts of the world. There used to be a phrase growing up. I remember in history class we learned the sun never sets on the British Empire. Yeah, exactly. So, and that was a point of pride. And if you think about it through this political cartoon from the time, this is an interesting critique of the tentacles grabbing onto things. So, could somebody read Linda Smith the definition here, the bit of writing?
While imperialism defined the global project of European expansion, colonialism was the modus operandi that ensured control in the colonies and its inhabitants.
So imperialism was going out and taking, but colonialism became the way it was controlled, right? So it goes from that, the tentacles, to what we see here. What do we see here? Does anybody recognize this, a picture like this?
Boarding school.
This is an Indian boarding school, correct, right? This is a Carlisle Indian School in Pennsylvania. We're going to dive into Carlisle Indian School later. So this is a part of our education history. I'm always going to remind you. So those of us that are educators or teachers, especially teachers here in the Americas, this is a part of our history, right? To take children away from their homes and to impart in them to wash them over, assimilate them into being a reflection of the imperialists that have come to the land. That process, and we want to call it a process or project, is colonialism. You'll hear many of our leading scholars in education research that talk about decolonial research, talk about it in this way: white settler colonialism. So it's a specific kind. The settler part, the white part probably is pretty clear. The colonialism part we can see here from this definition. But the settler part means you came and inhabited the land. Okay? All right. So moving forward. What event do we have here? Oh, come on, we all know this event. Sierra Vista, what do we got here?
Is that Chris?
That's Columbus. Yeah, and so what do you notice here? Like, let's do art history. That was part of my major in college. So this is where you can't, I always have, I was a humanities major, so I have a way of always going, you can't get away from me. All right, I have a little bit of expertise in everything and very little depth of anything too. So anyways, let's break this down and analyze it. What do you see here? What's missing?
The people that live there.
The people that live there. So this is good. Good job, Lord. So this fits into that definition we were hearing about a little bit, right? What else do you see? Yeah, Aaron.
It's planting the flag.
Planting the flag. I'm sorry. Good job, Aaron. What do we got? Any more out there? Either Douglas, Sierra Vista, what do you see?
There's declaration of a space, claiming a space for one's own without the presence of another.
And claiming it for whom? And building off of what Aaron said, that was a good job, Rick. But claiming it for whom?
It's hard to see who's on the flag, but I'm going to guess Spain.
So it's hard to see what's on the flag, Lori, good job. Yeah, so they're saying, and Aaron started rolling close to the flag. And so, look, Aaron found something. Yeah, that's good. I've never seen that. I've never been.
Yeah.
It looks like a person.
He found a native person in the far right corner. Not corner, far right border. Hiding in the bushes.
Picture on the right.
You see a dark brown face.
Yes.
Oh my God!
The middle of
that changes everything.
Yeah. So you also, so again, what Lori she said Spain. There's probably some coat of arms up here. We know from history he's probably claiming it for what else?
He's looking up.
Yeah. For who?
For God.
God, right? Christianity, very good. And then the thing that I like to point out is, and I very rarely get to do this talk, so I'm excited to point this out, is the three ships. Technology. Technology to the savages, in air quotes, right?
I think it's interesting. Thank you for pointing that out, Aaron. That if that is a person in the bushes, this would appear to be a native of that place who now has to hide in his or her own house, essentially, right? Yeah. Afraid to come out in his or her own house. And if we contextualize that contemporarily, about hiding and having to hide in your own house and not show yourself and the risk of doing so.
Hide and at the same time be aware of the state coming at you.
Surveillance.
Right, yeah.
Only because my kids just showed this to me this weekend. So the guy that proves everything wrong, and he does like spoofs and videos and stuff like that. I can't remember his name, but the kids. So they just showed me something on Christopher Columbus where he truly never set foot on the United States.
Right.
And then all he did was go down into the Caribbean area and just kill people.
Yeah.
Like that's it. I mean, so now I'm like, why are you showing
Right. So one of his compatriots at the time, and one of his colleagues, what's what I'm trying to look at, somebody who lived at the same time that he did, right? Contemporary, thank you, was De las Casas, right? So De las Casas comes on the boat, one of his trips with Columbus to the West Indies, the Caribbean, and what he says in his journal, a primary document, is that there are more people on this island than any capital in all of Europe. So what else do we not see here, right? We not only not see many natives, in fact, Aaron had to do a Where's Waldo to find, and I'd never seen it before, Aaron. That's awesome. Right? But there should be throngs of people. So we have this image in our heads that this was this virginal, the Americas were virginal. There was nobody there. But in actuality, from primary sources, we know that there were hundreds of thousands of people.
Millions.
Yeah, millions. But actually tens or hundreds of thousands on the islands themselves, which will blow your mind if you think about it. So we're going to do a great job, class. Pat yourself on the back. Nice job with art history. We're going to continue. Yeah, good patting on the back. I love it. There you go. You can pat each other. Just do it appropriately. So this is destiny. So all good. So Aaron went right. So this was something that we actually taught in Mexican American Studies in my colleagues' classes, and this was actual evidence used against us that we were teaching hate. Which is interesting because it's a famous portrait by John Gast, American Progress. And then, Aaron, could you say again what this inspired in you?
So there was the philosophy of manifest destiny, that it was the American right to go west and take the West for United States.
Right, and it was a right given by whom? God, right? So again, a connection to Columbus right there. So so this is called American Progress. And what can you see in this really quickly? We got to do this one really quickly. If you notice, if I may, I'm going to do it for you. You won't see me, but imagine I'm going to do it for the class here. But go from the right side, you'll see it's much lighter on the right, which is the eastern part of our continent. And who is this that's coming across to the darkness of the west? Who is that figure? Let's describe her. She's a what?
Angel.
Maybe an angel? That's good. What else?
Progress.
She's what? Oh, she's progress. Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yes. She's bringing technology with her. You see that? She's bringing the telegraph line. Right? That's progress. Amaru, you were on it. Nice job, hermana. All right. And then she's also not a human being because we have human beings there, right? So that's why whoever said angel, yeah, she's almost a godlike figure, a goddess, right? What's she carrying in her hand?
Electricity wires.
Electricity, but what about her right hand? A book. What's the book? Knowledge. Okay, good. Maria said knowledge. What book could it be?
Bible.
With a Bible. That's what I always thought it was a Bible too, but we're going to go a little bit closer in here. What's it say? School book. So Maria was dead on right here. You may have had a Maria in the other spots, but Maria nailed it. Knowledge. This is education. Well, what type of education could this be? So what kind of knowledge is she spreading if this is the manifest destiny, right? This is the God-given right of the United States to go from sea to shining sea. Who else do we see? How about down there?
Indians.
Yeah, the indigenous folks, right? And they're all doing what? Running like they're like Hurricane Harvey and Hurricane Irma's coming towards them, right? And they're right. It was a hurricane coming towards them. But notice the shading of the picture. I already told you about it. It's much darker on the left side where the dark people are too. What does that reinforce? Keep that to yourself right now, because I'm going to have you spend a little moment thinking about these pictures in a certain way. So colonialism, we often see it as an event. Like we see it as this part of this time period of the United States. But really, colonialism is a structure. It's a process that continues to operate, right? And that's what the last part of today is going to be about. So we're about halfway through, so we're going to go a little bit after 2, but not too much after. So I want us to think about right now in the separate spaces, right, in your groups, what structure, if this is a structure, right, what structure do the pictures enforce? Okay? What is this structure that these pictures are trying to establish? And then what is the narrative behind that as well? So what's the structure that those pictures are speaking to or trying to help create, and what is the narrative behind it? I'll give you a couple minutes, okay? Everybody, about 2 minutes.
So about the picture.
So it's not the sun rising in the east and the sun setting in the west with light to dark. It's definitely going from white to colored out.
Transformation of the land, like their building and their.
Well, I was interesting to me the way painting
white people is
the native
because it is
people and the Buffalo running in a line, and they were together to run out. So he also ran out in nature in that process of progress.
There was a bear, and the bear has the same, like, I'm running away, but I'm looking back. So it's kind of like
It's the angel.
It's a dehumanization of.
Because it was dark before they arrived.
Yeah, and the buffalo are running.
Yeah, there were not.
Oh wow!
And it's the same.
So what they did, I mean, the white people came and stopped migratory. The Native Americans were very migratory, and white people came and they just killed everything. Like, sweet new food, let's eat.
Yeah, like you see the pictures of like the mountains or
they
would kill. It wasn't just for the meat. It was an intentional driving out of the native resources.
One more minute, everybody.
What?
So what pictures does this reinforce the structure? What narrative behind it?
That what she's bringing along is better than what they have.
Okay.
Yeah, like we're here to teach you. We're not even going to value whatever knowledge you already have. You're not as
The
good.
clouds are dark.
Also,
Civilization provide.
Where you are.
Right.
Frame your eyes. It's interesting that they used a female in reference of that very sensitive, fragile mother.
Mother. The last thing is miners and farmers. They're coming to offer some progress to what they saw as a dormant place. The natives were not making any use of this place, and we're going to come and we're going to institute progress in our sense of the word. So progress in terms of industry, in terms of farming and so forth. And that the ways that it was being handled, the land that is prior to our arrival, was just kind of a waste, and therefore it's better for everybody that we come in and do these things that we're going to do.
All right. So I'm gonna bring you all back. Some of my colleagues that are doing some amazing research, similar to the research that Rick's doing. Actually, I always think we forget to put shine upon our own folks, and I've been through that, and I never want to be a part of that. So Rick does some amazing work with microaggressions and whatnot, and he goes deep into that work, deep into whiteness. And some of our colleagues around the country are starting to look at health factors that come along with this idea of colonialism. So it's not just education. And that where we see this. And so one of those places is the idea of structural violence. So we just talked about structure and colonialism being a structure. So this is Paul Farmer, and I'm going to read it to you if you don't mind. Structural violence is a term coined by Johann Galtung and by liberation theologians during the 1960s. Describes social structures, economic, political, legal, religious, and cultural, that stop individuals, groups, and societies from reaching their full potential. In its general usage, the word violence often conveys a physical image. However, according to Galtung, it is the, quote, avoidable impairment of fundamental human needs, or the impairment of human life, which lowers the actual degree to which someone is able to meet their needs below that which would otherwise be possible. Okay? There's more to this, but that's a lot, so just let that sink in for a little bit. All right? Here's the next part of the quote. Structural violence is often embedded in long-standing, quote, ubiquitous social structures normalized by stable institutions and regular experiences, end quote. I think that's really important when we talk about schooling, okay, when we talk about education. Because they seem so ordinary in our ways of understanding the world, they appear almost invisible. Disparate access to resources, political power, education, healthcare, and legal standing are just a few examples. The idea of structural violence is linked very closely to social injustice and the social machinery of oppression. So Farmer does his work in the medical field. All right, and so I actually added this where I got this quote from to our cultural diversity in education class, so that we can start seeing that this isn't just an education. There's not just a bunch of educational scholars or crazy radical ethnic studies people, like how they throw these titles upon us when we start talking about words like oppression and words like dehumanization, and when we start saying decolonial work, right? That the medical field is seeing this as well. This is where a lot of our babies are right now, who come to us, and a lot of their mamas and daddies come to us, who are suffering from these other mental health issues, physical health issues, and lack of political power, lack of documentation, as we're seeing this week, which is a legal status. And it has ramifications in their mental health, their physical health. So, of course, we see it explode in our classrooms. And then we ask, what's going on? Well, we should know what's going on if we're doing this kind of education. Because, again, it's a ubiquitous thing, right? As Farmer says, ubiquitous social structures. They're normalized to be stable, right? But we need to interrogate them. And that's what you and I are doing today. So we're going to look at a little case study that builds on this, and that the idea is back to Carlisle Indian School, all right? So this project was put in place in our country. I want to say, I got my notes right here, so give me a second. So yeah, it was in 1879 through 1918 that these boarding schools, the Carlisle Indian boarding school being the one we're going to look at right now, were flourishing. And what the project there, well, you see the product on the screen, but the project was what you see as the title. They went by the mantra of kill the Indian, save the man. So there was this embedded idea. This was best practices. This is what I try to, so this is why it's so important for teachers to understand this. It was best practices at the time to absolutely save the savage from themselves. And that's not my language, that's their language. The racialization of savagery is something that Ronald Takaki talked about years ago. It's also something we used to teach in our MAS classes. It's high-level stuff, and it was also stuff that was seen as illegal, threatening, and got banned here in Arizona at one point. So these truths are controversial, but really these truths are our history, and so we got to lean into them. And so I always ask educators of color to understand this history intimately too, because we're part of this history of being educators. So we can't just skate out of it because we weren't of European descent doing this to Native folks. No, we got to understand that this has been a schooling project. Done to children for a long, long time, all right? So what do you see here, just really quickly before we see a little video? What's this process happening? Aaron's got his hand up here. Go ahead, Aaron.
Education made him lighter.
Ooh, yeah. Did y'all hear that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, good. That's a good catch. Good catch. What else do you all notice? How about folks in Douglas? What do you all notice is going on with these children?
Religion was involved with education.
Religion was involved in education. And did the native children have a religion or a spirituality? They probably did, but what was happening to it?
Letting it go.
It was being suppressed. It was being erased. It was being erased. Good. How about Sierra Vista? Do you have any more comments about what you see in this process?
I just would like to say, as a fashionista, that the erasing of a fashion life is very much evident here.
Right. There's a uniform to be civilized that's being embedded in these children. And like what Amaru said, it's being approved by, as you see in the bottom right corner, there you see a bunch of nuns, right? So this definitely has a certain persuasion or certain flavor to this domestication, as they probably would have seen it, of killing the savage and saving the man. All right. So we're going to watch a little bit of this film, and then we're going to keep moving. I think this was done by the History Channel, so it's about 5 minutes of the Carlisle Indian School. This is fiction, obviously, but based upon the real lived experiences of these young people.
I wonder if you could find a standard. I'm sure you could.
Don't make this more difficult. I'm just scared.
You see these marks? Each word is a white man's name. You will choose one of these names for your own. Begin, please.
Hiram.
Meredith.
Walter.
Carl.
George.
Abigail.
Come along, children.
I love that part at the end where he says his name to himself. You know, we call that later in the workshops that we do with teachers, we call that resistant capital. We get this from the Tarayoso's framework about different cultural wealth and different capital that we have. We also talk about in my classes and with our teachers that we work with on the road, the importance that the name changing phenomenon still happens to this very day against students' wills, and we have to be mindful of that, and we have to be thoughtful about what history we're connected to when we engage in that process. So I thought I'd bring this the Carlisle Indian School to Dean Cubberley's quote here. Dean Cubberley was the dean at Stanford, so one of our great institutions of higher education, because I think we need to bring our consciousness to higher education as well. This wasn't just a K-12 thing. This was in all of our institutions of education. And so does anybody want to read this quote from Dean Cubberley? Good. Can somebody else do it?
Go ahead, Aaron, you're on it.
Okay, our task is to assimilate and amalgamate these people as part of our American race and to implant in their children, so far as can be done, the Anglo-Saxon conception of righteousness, law, and order.
So this was best practices. Again, this is so it was fortified and emphasized by some of the greatest institutions in our country as best practices for teaching children. So the process is obviously of erasure as far as can be done, which is another way of looking. It's very much a deficit perspective towards children of color. All right. And it also raises up what other culture above it? The Anglo-Saxon. And what's interesting is the American race. So America becomes like what's an American race? That doesn't make any sense unless we're talking about the Olympic trials in the pool, or that's a race of Americans, or on the track. But here, this is where we were in the 1900s, and these are the people that built institutions that we work for and work with and get educated by, right? This is the type of mindset. So when you're talking about Anglo-Saxon righteousness and order being superior, what words do we use for that? What's that called? Who believes in that? And what's it called? Supremacy. White supremacy, right? So those folks in Charlottesville, they would really love this. Those neo-Nazis that were marching in our country and organized, this is what they were about. They'd be like, yes, that's what we got to go back to. And I just want to put that out there very clearly. Thank you, Rick. And let's bring it back home. So let's bring it to Tucson. So I got about 10 more minutes. So let's see how far we can get. So Tucson and the West. So this is Robson Elementary School, right? In 1953. You can check out the Howdy Doody, Richie Cunningham kind of Opie Taylor looking stuff. Those are all popular cultural references in the United States. Sorry, my friends in Douglas. But
it's a Robinson School.
C. Rose was the superintendent in Tucson just before these children would be in school. So right about the time they were born, he was. I checked my notes. He was superintendent from 1920 to 1941. We have a school named after him in Tucson, USD. And this is what I don't think he was a doctor. I don't. This is what Superintendent Rose said. All right. One for the foreign problem, Tucson. All right, yeah, let's name a school after him. Anyway, sorry. One phase of the foreign problem in Tucson is that foreigners live in communities, districts, where they can live their whole lives and not feel the need of knowing English, because they have in these communities their own establishments as far as commercial life is concerned. He continues. Oops, I went too far. Shoot. Sorry, I gotta go back. My bad. I always do 2 clicks and it's just one. It's just I have to be patient. It's hard for me. There we go. The supervisor, that's himself, and teachers of these children have been persistent in their efforts, and this is why I put this in bold, to get English into the homes and awaken in the parents, I love that, awaken in the parents an interest to learn English and to learn and to assimilate the high ideals of customs of this country. And this is all thanks to Tom Sheridan, who did this amazing book called Los Tucsonenses, back in 1986. He was a dean at the University of Arizona for years. So we can see this, those of us that are from Arizona, we have heard this exact phrase come from our superintendents of public instruction, high-level state officials, right? And part of this is connected to that superiority, looking at not only the children, the Mexican children, with a deficit, but their families, right? So remember what Cubberley said, as so far as can be done with them. Like, you can only get these, I'm going to pretend to be them. You can only get these savages to a certain point, but then after that, they're just tapped out. They don't have the intellectual capacity to be equal to us, right? You can see it here, right, with Mr. Rose, who we named a school after, I remind you, that the parent, an interest, they want to awaken in the parents. So the parents are asleep. They don't understand what these children need. And we need to assimilate them, erase what they are culturally, erase their language, Spanish, and assimilate them to the high ideals of this country. This is what happened to me. This is why I can't, in my family, this is why I can't speak Spanish to Rick, to Maria, to my wife, to any of the Fulvestre scholars, because language erasure, much like Superintendent Rose did here in Tucson, happened in the Bay Area, and it was very successful. So building off of this, it wasn't just that, it was our own university. So the University Arizona master's thesis, Tom Sheridan went back and did his research. He found quotes like this, and these were exemplars. These were like typical quotes that he found. There is a Mexican problem in the United States. Whew, glad those days are over. The Mexican is the product of the autocratic individualism of the Latins plus the pride and exclusiveness of the American Indian. So they even started like looking through the lineage of what, how do you make a Mexicano, right? How do you make somebody who's Mexican? And they're like, well, it comes from these two broken other things, right? The Latins, which I assume is the Italianos, right? Wouldn't you think that? Or Spanish. Or Spanish, yeah. And maybe French too. Let's get that whole, all those people. And then, of course, Native folks, the pride and exclusiveness of Native Americans, okay? Or American Indian, all right? So there was more. And this is stuff that I used to read this with my students at Tucson High. So here are some other great quotes. Exceedingly, like Mexicans, exceedingly individualistic and preoccupied with sex thoughts. Mind you, they're talking about children. So I used to ask my students, how many of your parents went to Tucson schools? I'm sorry, grandparents went to Tucson schools, and they'd raise their hands. I go, good, go home tonight and go to your nana and say, Nana, did you struggle in school because you were preoccupied with sex thoughts? And my students would be like, oh, no, thank you. Nana gonna throw the chancla at me or slap the taste out of my mouth or like she'll send me straight to church to talk a confession. How dare you, right? But this is what they're saying about our babies. Ignorant of the most fundamental social concepts, rather pathetic ignorance of all modern aspects of an economic civilization such as ours. So we're seeing this really clear connection throughout the time we've spent together that of what this looks like as a project, what this looks like as a structure. So what are the effects of that structure upon our children when you start eating this every day, when you consume it, when you internalize it? So Maldonado Tejada wrote an amazing analysis of this work. And so the internal effects of colonialism, what we were just talking about, shows up in the following ways. Can I get some folks to read this for me so I can take a sip of water?
Shame of indigenous culture, your culture of origin and your ancestry. Bullet 2, believing that the colonizing culture is better and smarter. Bullet 3, changing name to a more Anglo-sounding one. Bullet 4, changing physical aspects to look more like, quote, the standard, unquote. Last bullet, not questioning the curricula in academia, which defines our ancestors and us as, quote unquote, primitive, quote unquote uncivilized and or quote unquote backward.
So, does anybody really need to leave really quickly? Because I have two more video clips to show you, and then I kind of want to try to wrap it up and then tease you to see if you want me to come do the next part of this, which is what we did at Tucson High. Has anybody really got to go real quick?
Curtis, I have to go, but I want to be in on the second round.
Okay, cool. I'm going to show one of the two clips then, and maybe I'll bring us back maybe I'll bring us back later with another one of them. So I'm actually going to skip this one, but they're both from Mi Familia, which you can see there was produced in 1995, right? It's a film about a Mexican family in Los Angeles. But I'm going to skip actually to this one. Because one of the things we talked about is shame of your family and adopting the name of the other culture, amongst other things. So let's watch this one really quickly together. This is about Guillermo, Memo, right? Or what he calls himself now, Bill.
Okay.
It's after that kiss, after that bitch.
Jimmy was trying to come back from the dead, and it wasn't so easy. But he was trying real hard to be part of La Familia again. And he had the chance of his lifetime one Sunday when Memo brought his fiancée and her parents all the way from Bel Air to meet everybody. Her name was Karen Gillespie. She and Memo had met at UCLA when they both were law students. And even though she had been born and raised in LA, she and her family had never been to East LA.
We are. Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Are those beans?
Oh, that's right. My father, he loves to plant vegetables.
I think that's wonderful.
Don't mind Bandido here. He's a little relaxed. It's kind of a fixture.
After all the introductions, we got down to the serious business of getting to know each other.
Well, it's so nice to have you. Jose and I are very proud to have you in our home. Welcome.
Thank you.
Salud. And salud. Salud.
Ah, yes, cheers.
Cheers. Memo always tells us so much about you. Who?
They call me Memo. My family calls me that. It's a diminutive for Guillermo. That's William in Spanish. Memo is like Bill. See? Bill.
Oh.
Bill.
Memo.
That's cute.
Yeah.
That is cute.
It's good. Well, Karen certainly has told us all about you folks.
Oh, yes.
Yes, she has.
Thank you.
Bill, don't you have a younger brother?
Oh, you mean Jimbo? Jimbo! He's around here. Jimbo. This is my son, Jimbo.
Hello.
Bill told us you were away at school.
School? Not exactly school.
Actually, he was in prison for a little while.
Prison?
I read a lot of books, though. That's what he must have meant.
It's just one of those things, you know, that can happen. It's not Bill's. No.
So you can see what happened to Memo, who became Bill, and you can even witness some of those things that Maldonado was Torres was talking about. Right in him internalizes great acting about, the shame, the name change, all sorts of different things, right? So one of the ways to kind of bring this to more of a conclusion and then think about where we go from here is how does this affect our students? If they're going through this project, if they're going through this process, this structure, and we're not intentionally disrupting that structure, they're internalizing this. And this is like one of the major myths of what we did in ethnic studies is encourage resentment. Really what it was to humanize the students' experiences, right? So you can see a quote here from Malcolm X, and as long as you can be convinced you never did anything, you will never do anything. And we're asking, what else is our student thinking? Because you look at him, how does the student look right there?
Frustrated.
Overwhelmed. Bored, right? And if you can see, I'll read these to you because you might not be able to see them. Well, there's a pretty clear picture, but I'm not even going to college. This is so boring. I'm just not smart enough to get it. This is stuff we hear. This is stuff Rick heard all the time when he was at Sunnyside teaching Chicano studies. This is stuff we would hear every year in our classes at Tucson High and in the Mexican American Studies program at Tucson Unified. This is the internalized message they have. And this is also the structural message they get from counselors and from teachers, unfortunately. There aren't many spaces that do the opposite, all right? And we can see the importance of this.
Okay, so just so you, like, students with learning disabilities have that same internalized
Absolutely. Absolutely, right?
No matter what color.
There's so many marginalized groups that feel the same, and that's something that actually is quote. Let me read this quote first, and then you'll see how we expand the lens. Thus, coloniality survives colonialism. So everyone that thinks it stopped, that this ended, Maldonado's saying it keeps going. It survived it. It is maintained alive in books and the criteria for academic performance, in cultural patterns, in common sense, in the self-image of peoples and aspirations of self, and so many other aspects of modern experience. In a way, as modern subjects, we breathe coloniality all the time, every day. That means all of us. That's why I was like, I didn't mean to cut Laura out, but I wanted to get to this so that we could expand the lens, right? It's really important to see this through an ethnic lens, through a racial lens, because that is central to a lot of the discord in our nation. But it doesn't only apply to those children. And it also says that we have all been products of this system too. So again, if we take this as normalized, ubiquitous, innocent, it keeps rolling on. But for us to help the students that Lori's talking about, or any other marginalized group, say like LGBTQ, right, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender students, we need to interrogate the structure, okay? And then figure out how we can humanize their experiences in the classroom. And that's where I'm going, and I'm going to wrap up really quickly here. So here's your homework, all right? Where do you hear echoes of colonialism in the media? Where do you see the residues of colonialism in our schools? And then what are the intersections between the history of colonialism and what we call the opportunity gap, which is the way we talk about the achievement gap, because the achievement gap is supposed to be the gap between, white students, or what I would say European American students, and students of color. And that gap between how they do in school was named the achievement gap, but that puts it on the student, which is another product of colonialism, right? The fault is not with the system, it's with the individual. Opportunity gap, and later, more in line with what Rick's going to present in a couple months, equity literacy, the new way of talking about it isn't even opportunity gap, it's actually opportunity debt, is what Gloria Ladson-Billings is turning. There is a debt of opportunity that we owe students, and thus we need to give them equity. All right, so this is your homework for when you come back, either with Rick or Francesca. I don't know if you want to give them 1 month, 2 months to do your homework. You're going to write a paper. No, you're not going to write a paper. But I want you to be thinking about these things before we come back as a familia, as a community, and hang out again. Okay? I want to do one more thing. No, we're not going to do Lee. I'll bring Lee back with me. Yeah, let's do this. And then, when we come back and we spend some time with Francesca, Dr. Lopez, about asset-based pedagogies, one of the things that we found that was really helpful is this ethnic studies paradigm that we saw in the beginning. This is from Alison Titiaro-Cubales and amongst other writers. So I want to just read this to you because this is reflective of why I think ethnic studies programs were so effective in Tucson and why they're so effective throughout the country. Decolonization is as liberatory process essential to ethnic studies pedagogy because it allows for systematic critique of the traumatic history of colonialism on Native and Third World peoples, and subsequently healing from colonial trauma, including the trauma of having learned to see oneself as academically incapable. So you heard me mention it before. We were told we were racist. We were told that we hated white people, which is interesting because I am biracial and my mama is of European descent, thus what people would say white. And I know of that experience very intimately. But that wasn't what our concern was at all. That's a very egocentric, arrogant concern, because it's almost like if somebody's speaking a foreign language, you always assume they're talking about you, right? That's the same kind of mentality. No, our spaces were to heal this trauma. Our spaces were for ourselves, not to hate others. It was to love self. And I move on with Allison here. In conjunction with decolonization, the purpose of ethnic studies is to eliminate racism. Ethnic studies pedagogy as an anti-racist project encourages both teachers and students to critique racial oppression at the institutional, interpersonal, and internalized levels, while also showing how each level influences the other. That is the other part of the project is so important. It's the counter project. If colonialism was built on this racism and superiority, then we must critique it, deconstruct it, and build something that is anti-racist. That is, and the way to do that is not by ignoring it. It's by digging deep into it. But are we doing this? My question is, are we doing this in our schools? Well, what Ana Valenzuela found out in subtractive schooling is we weren't. We were subtracting the humanity from our students. We were subtracting their personal wealth through this structure that we had created. And so this leads right into Francesca. So 2 more slides. So I want you to think about this. This will lead into what Francesca is going to go deep into the next time. Students' cultural world and their structural position must also be fully apprehended with school-based adults, deliberately bringing issues of race, difference, and power into central focus. So in other words, we cannot be scared of going there. We can't be scared of going to these topical, controversial spaces that we've been taught and conditioned to think are controversial when they're actually liberatory and they're actually healing. Okay? This approach necessitates abandoning the notion of colorblind, right? Exactly what Allison said earlier in the slide before about ethnic studies being anti-racist. Well, if you're going to be anti-racist, you got to know what racism is. Colorblindness negates racism, says it doesn't exist. All right, and the last quote is one of my favorites. A more profound and involved understanding of socioeconomic, linguistic, social-cultural, and structural barriers that obstruct the mobility of Mexican youth, and you can change that to whatever food group you want. African-American youth, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender youth needs to inform all caring relationships. And here's the kicker. Authentic caring cannot exist unless it's imbued with and motivated by such political clarity. So, do our teachers that we produce from this university and other spaces of teacher preparation, do they have this political clarity? Do we, the instructors at this university, have this political clarity? Because if we don't, we cannot authentically care for our children. Punto final. That's it. There is no middle ground. So it is my position and my belief, and I have wonderful data to show you the effects of it. If you lean into this in a responsible, scholarly way, in a teacher, in a way that is like the true term of the word educación, right? Then you're going to get much further and much more connection and much more, thus greater results, because the students will be engaged in something that they see as authentic and critical to their lives, and not some condition that they're going through. So that's it for me. Went a little long, but thank you for hanging with me.
Stop. Can I ask a question?
What's that?
Can I ask a question?
Sure. I got a couple minutes before I gotta go pick up my son.
Okay. Will you just say something about the term political clarity? What do you think she's focused on there?
Well, I'm not sure what she was focused upon, but the way I use this with teachers is to get them out of the mindset of thinking about politics as a campaign, and thus getting out of this mindset of thinking of political parties. Now, what she's talking about with political there, she names earlier, right? Socioeconomics, linguistic, sociocultural, structural barriers, that's political. That's understanding things political. So my opinion of that is socio-political. Get your analysis tight. Get your analysis, have a clear analysis based upon real research, real understanding of your community. Walk the block, be an ethnographer, and you will have a better opportunity to engage with your families in an authentic way. So that's usually how I go about that.
Thank you.
Yeah, Lori.
This is like big issue. So, two things. One, like, what would be the breakdown of current teachers? They're mostly, a high majority of them are white, middle class women, some men in there, and they're young.
Yeah, well, yeah.
And generally speaking, they're young. So how do you take this message to the current realm, huge realm of teachers, and then the kids that are coming up there? So I can see where an issue might be if you're teaching an ethnic study in a high Hispanic cultural school, and it's not, that message, this so important message, is not getting out to their white counterpart.
Yeah, that's why I actually argue that with folks that it's almost more important to have ethnic studies in the white spaces.
Yes. I mean, as a white person, I can just say whatever was in there. I don't know if I would have gotten it in high school, but
yeah, you would have.
I definitely would have gotten it like in college.
No, they get it in high school. They get it in elementary school.
Right. I'm just saying.
I didn't pull.
Okay, but anyway, so but
yeah.
You know, it's
kids get it better than us.
That needs to be shared with whatever group name you stick in there.
Right.
All the others. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if you're talking about disabled students, you need to have that message out to other people. You're talking about the LGBT, I'm going to mess up,
right.
Lesbian, gay, transsexual. Those people, all the other people in their world need this message. Those people already know that message. You know, it's like crystal clear because that's our lives. You know, but that other. And
those groups are super important, but those groups don't. Well, sorry.
It goes against everything that they've ever learned. So you're giving them.
Well, let me finish real quick, Lori. I just want to. It's really important to lean into race and ethnicity without having to always diffuse it with like, what about the other groups? So it's more of an and instead of an or, right? Yeah, no, yes. All of these marginalized, alienated groups need it, but there's a discomfort. This is what I tell superintendents in the places I work with all the time that I think my colleagues and I are real gifted at. We're comfortable in the we're comfortable in the uncomfortable, and by working with teachers, we make them more comfortable in the uncomfortable.
Right.
And so it allows them to stay in it, stay connected to what we're talking about without having to go to like all lives matter right away, right? Because yes, an exchange I saw on Facebook years ago was Black Lives Matter. Somebody responded to them, all lives matter, and then the person retorted with, yes, that's what I said. If you have a Black Lives Matter mentality, you care about human beings.
Right.
And what a lot of folks want to say is like, what about me all the time? What about me? It's like, okay.
Right,
but we're not listening to what about them. Yeah,
right.
So yeah,
but
it's an empathy issue.
But it's that human being thing. So there are people out there that don't view the others as human beings. Like, were you here earlier when Eric was in here?
No.
That's like the message of, I am white, I am the human being.
So where does that come from?
It comes from who knows where, because they brought it.
Well, according to the last hour and a half, where does it come from?
Well, it comes from over in Europe somewhere. It came with these people. They carried it with them when they entered.
Possibly.
My ancestors.
Possibly, or it's something that we reproduce all the times in schools. So what these folks get is it reinforced in them. So I'm not talking about where it's born. Where is that person that says those things? Where did they learn it? And we always say, well, they learned it at home. No, what the last hour and a half shows is no, they've learned it through the structure we've created called school.
But it's not just in our school. It's
in
the movies.
You're right.
It's in our culture.
It's institutionalized. And we got it. So the only institution I have any locus of control in is this one right now. But you're right. There are other folks doing that similar work in these other institutions, including healthcare, including the government. Believe it or not, there's actually some good folks out there. I've met them. They don't live here.
Well, I'm with Etta, going way back to one of her first comments about how it's really a shame or it's sad or embarrassing that our fellow faculty members are not here. I mean, this is huge.
And yeah, there might be something to be said about that, too. So that's all things for us to reflect upon. But the good thing is, and my positionality and my disposition has always been, thank you for being here. That's what matters.
Thank you, Curtis. I happen to be here, so I feel
thank you for being here.
But I'm so touched, and it's very, very inspiring. I think confronted this kind of problems, as an Asian, all the time, and I'm fully aware of this problem. And this like a workshop is opening my eyes to see the deeper, because I have a 16-year-old daughter, and she claims herself as a feminist. I'm very, as an Asian Chinese mother, sometimes I feel scared because she's very sensitive to racism, and I'm very scared because as a adult, kind of close, I'm 44 years old. I have been here almost 20 years, and I'm fully aware of the racism problem, but I really scared, like you say, like we want, like the natives in the picture, they want to hide. And I'm not a native here, but most time I want to hide. But I think something I feel I'm still very frustrated because I think this is a structural thing, like the Anglo-Saxon, conception is like people, even Americans this time, they want to it seems from my perspective as a Asian, background, with an Asian background, it's kind of a lot of times arrogant. And the Americans, Europeans, they think what they have are better than, whatever else hold. So that's very, very frustrating. But this problem is structure, is the structure thing. And I have the same frustration as Lori, it seems so. Some, few individuals might be interested, might be aware, but how to approach this problem. But I'm glad, you are advocating, you have been advocating this problem, and at least you let people be aware of this issue. And, like me, like I can see this one, explicitly, this kind of thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That means a lot. All right, hey, I'd love to chat more, but I really got to go get my children.
Thank you, Curtis, for today.
But hopefully we'll have another chance to hang out. I think I can just pull it through.